Hey everybody, welcome back to welcome back to the Meaningforge. Today I have with me Chris Chandler-Yates from Create, From Why, and Knocking Demons. Chris is that happens. All right, Chris is on a mission to help people articulate their why and mission statement so they are served by what they do. His efforts enable people to live their best life and conquer their emotional and physical states. Join us today as we dive into how Chris makes, embodies, and shares meaning in his life. Welcome to the Meaningforge. I had a few moments. Well, welcome, Chris, to Meaningforge.
Yeah, welcome. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me on. It's an honor to be here, and yeah, it's good to have another chat. I know we've chatted in the past about stuff, and yeah, it's gonna be good.
Well, you're leading your own adventure right now through the power of our story, as this interview is being recorded, and we're like exploring why, mission statements, and a few other things. And just between you and I, don't let David ever mediate again. But anyway, it's all right. It's all right. It was a great.
Okay, cool. That's good to know. It'll be interesting this week.
So it's great, and it's great to have you on because you and I also had a great conversation too a few days ago, talking about meaning and how we make and find and kind of share meaning in our life. And I think it was then I was like, I need to have you on my podcast because we're doing some similar types of things. So welcome to the Meaningforge. And
thanks. It's good to be
here.
I'm
excited. Man. I'm really excited to get through this because I love your energy throughout pretty much all of our interactions.
Yeah. It wasn't always that way, but yeah, there's some dark times there, man. And we'll talk about those today. But yeah, it's, you know, how I turn up is how I turn up now. It's I remember a while back, I turned up like this. That's how I was. And then through my journey in the law enforcement, I lost myself, which I know we'll go deep into. But then I kind of found myself and found this whole meaning, why, purpose, the mission statement. And yeah, it changed everything. It's just, you got to live who you are now.
Hey, I agree. So I guess this is my favorite question. And it's also the question that many people just get to just ask and they don't always like, because it's the tell me about yourself question. And it's so tell me about yourself and where you're from, and we'll start there and we'll start building this out.
Yeah, sweet, man. I know. Yeah, it's a funny question when people ask me, who are you? I'm like, well, where do you want me to start? Who I am now, and this comes down to that mission statement. Who I am now is I create less pain for myself and others. Also create the best version of ourselves. That's who I am. For the longest time, I tried to be so many different people. I tried to be, the son. I tried to be the friend, the husband, all these different things. I tried to be the cop. I was a cop for 7 years here in New Zealand. I'm originally from California, so my identity still is, I still have a lot tied in, and where we're from or who we are or where we identify from always is part of us. And so I'm American. I'm originally from California. Left the States when I was 14. With my parents and my little brother. They took me on, and they took the four of us on a 40-foot catamaran, started in the Caribbean, and we sailed halfway around the world. Plan was to go all the way around, but we made it to New Zealand in 2004, and we never left. My parents went to Fiji and then came back with a plan to stay and settle here, as you call it when you're sailing. I guess it's settling. So we kind of settled here. I was just shy of 18 at the time, so I managed to get residency with them, permanent residency. And then a few years later, I managed to get citizenship as well with my parents because I had done my residency with them. So I have dual citizenship with New Zealand and the US, which is amazing. So depending on which part of the world I go to, I use different passports, depending on what's going on as well. But I always have my US passport because it's very powerful and I'll never get rid of it. So I got here in 2004. A few years later, met my now wife. And then about a couple of years after that, I ended up becoming a police officer here in New Zealand. I applied to join the police here in 2009, and finally actually got in 2011. January 2011, went down to what we call police college. I know in the US it's police academy. But our police force is completely different here. It's all one sole police force. So there isn't the different jurisdictions, federal, state, marshals. There isn't all those different things. It's all just one. So you move around within it. And so then they hire you. They put you down to police college. You're down there. I was down there for 19 weeks. It's now 16. It keeps getting shorter and shorter. I don't know why. Should get longer and longer. They're giving you more and more tools, but yet you have less and less time to train with them. But anyways, I diverge. So yes, I did that and then came out and I ended up working in Auckland, which is New Zealand's largest city, not the capital, but the largest city. And so I worked at a station called North Shore. And at the time, I started identifying as a police officer. I know we're here to talk about meaning in that. If I rewind just a little bit, I never wanted to be a cop when I was a kid. Like literally, I was like, I respected them. I was like, yep, cool. But I was like, man, you got to follow the rules. What? I don't like rules. Rules suck. So I never wanted to be a cop. But then my sister, I didn't know what I wanted to do actually. When I got here to New Zealand, at first I wanted to do naval architecture, design boats. I wanted to be kind of, design race boats and sailboats, and then kind of fell away from that. And then from there, my wife's, so my brother-in-law, he was like, oh, I think Bad Boys 2 or something was out or something. And he's like, man, we should join and be partners and we could be like Bad Boys 2 and all that. I was like, oh yeah, that'd be kind of fun. I was like, if I'm going to do that, I'm going all the way. I'm going to SWAT. Like SWAT, it just looks awesome. That you get to play with cool toys. I mean, I grew up in the States, man. I've been shooting since I was like 5. I was like, you get to play with cool toys
of the police force.
Yeah, exactly. It's the guys, that I feel like everybody looks up to. Like, fuck, they're just like the cool guys. But yeah, so that's where I wanted to go. And so he planted that seed and I was kind of like, oh, maybe. And so I went to what they call a seminar here, where it's like an information night. Went, and at the time I'm 6'6", so I'm quite tall. And at the time I was weighing in at 72 kilos, which is about 155 pounds. So I was nothing. I was skin and bones pretty much. And just that's from sailing, and I have fast metabolism. But so I went, and on their screen they had BMI. And so I was like, I'm anorexic. And they're like, oh, we don't worry about that anymore. Don't worry. That slide just hasn't been deleted. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And so the seed was planted, but then I was still doing like my skipper's tickets, and I was going down that sailing kind of road. And I got my wife and I on a boat, and then that fell through. And so she had quit her job because we were going to go work on this boat in New Caledonia. And I didn't have a job. And so I was like, I got some money sitting in the States. Why don't we go back to the US? And she had no desire initially to go back to the US. But now she was married, she was dating an American. So we went back. And I was in LA, and I remember we were there kind of towards the end of our trip of 3 months. And I didn't see, but we were driving to my uncle's house for early Thanksgiving dinner. And there was some smoke and all these cars parked on this overpass. And we're like, what the hell's going on? The friend that we were staying with was like, oh, it's probably just a fire. It's Southern California, probably just a fire somebody people are looking at. Oh, yeah, sweet. So we carried on. And on the way home, we stopped at the gas station at the time. I don't know if they still have them so much. I don't see them so much anymore. But they had little TVs on the gas pumps. And on there was breaking news. A passenger train had collided with a freight train head on. They got on the same tracks. And come to find out, 23 or 21 people died that day. But I remember sitting there at her house watching the news and watching the cops go in and pull people out. And I went, I want to be doing that. And that leads to, further into the future. Now that I know my mission statement, I know my why and my purpose, is it has to do with reducing pain. What I saw that day on the TV was cops in the time when people were in the most pain, and they were making the biggest difference. And so that next day I had to get LASIK eye surgery, which was why I was kind of on the stand up. Do I want to do it or not? At the time it was like $3,500 to get it done, or $4,000 to get it done. And so I called up my mom and I go, I need to borrow some money. And she goes, why? Because I want to get my eyes lasered because I want to join the police. And she went, you want to do what? And so I did it. 3 days later, got my eyes lasered about 2 weeks before I flew back to New Zealand. And I started running. I started training. I never ran really at all before that. And that's my journey. But then fast forward 2 years, in the police. So that's about 4 years from that date. I started to burn out. I had a female partner of mine get assaulted while we were trying to arrest somebody. I took it to heart. I blamed myself for it. And I started to spiral downhill. Looking back now, reflecting, it all has to do with, again, my mission statement. It was that day that she got assaulted. It went completely against my mission statement. It went completely against my why, my purpose, because somebody ended up having pain caused on my watch. And so instead of thinking of, okay, cool, let's learn from this, what can I do better from this? I just spiraled downhill and just went, nah. And so that was the start of my decline. Stayed in the police for another 5 years, and went on, and I ended up not doing our version of SWAT. I tried out for it, passed everything except for scenarios, because I was a bit too young in the job. But then I ended up going down the VIP protection and did that for 3.5, almost 4 years. And then I left because I had lost myself through everything going on in the place. And all because I lost focus of my purpose. And that's why now I'm so passionate about making sure that people have it, but not just have it, but learn to stay focused on it in the hard times, in those dark times, because it's easy to stay focused on it and live from it when things are going well. But when you start to get knocked, you got to really be able to pull yourself back to it, and vocalize it, and use the language to keep it uplifting you, because it's very easy to get drawn into the darkness of the negative sides of it. So that's a bit about me, and that's a bit of my journey. And as little time as I kind of can, obviously.
It's good, man. It's good. It's about right.
I could go on for hours about it.
Well, the thing is, you can't have these conversations. I don't think you can really have these conversations without having some kind of deep dive or at least some overview of people's past. Like it's next to impossible. I think having that conversation then sets the groundwork, and it's interesting because you already have your why, but we'll kind of get into that first a little later. But first, if you don't mind me asking, what was a major life lesson that you learned from your parents, and why?
Learn from my parents. Well, real quick, I just wanted to also rewind just a little bit with where, who I am, and that, how I got to where I am. In the end, and I don't think this gets talked about enough, is in the end, when I was policing, I was so dark and so distant that I would not say boo to a ghost unless I was working. I'd go to parties, or I'd try not to go to parties, or go to friends' houses, or even, my in-laws. And I'd say like 2 words the whole night. And at the time I didn't recognize it. But then what really shifted me and made me aware of a lot of stuff was I almost cheated on my wife. I remember being at a friend's house. She was away overseas. She was away at an event or something, running an event for work. And I was at a friend's house, and my friend gone to bed, and her friend was still there, and we were watching TV. And I found myself, how you get, when you're single and you're wanting to kind of crack onto a woman, and you're like, you're literally putting every scenario through your head on how you actually make a move so that you can go further. I was at that stage, and I was like, I caught myself, and I was like, who the hell are you, Chris? This isn't you. Why are you doing this? And so I guess that kind of leads me into one of the big things that I learned from my parents is don't fucking cheat on your partner. My wife and I, from the very beginning, my parents cheated on each other, and that stayed together for a long time, and it caused a lot of turmoil in that. They still are friends, but they're not together, and I love them both dearly. But in fact, my mom's here at the moment. She's coming up from down in New Zealand to visit for Easter weekend. But my wife and I in the very beginning said, if we ever get to the stage where we are so unhappy that we're, thinking about cheating on each other, before we do that, so we don't ruin that relationship or everything that we've worked through, we talk to each other. And so literally I went home that day and I told her, I was like, this happened. She didn't talk to me for about a week, which is understandable. But then we've started to work through it. And at that stage, I was like, hey, look, I want a divorce. I'm done. I'm out. So that's one thing that I learned from, just from that. But the other thing that I really learned from my parents is resilience. I remember back, and it sticks with me a lot, especially these days, is when I was sailing, first year on the boat, we went to an island where they were running a regatta, a sailing race over a few days and multiple races. And a friend of my mom's son was on board and staying on board with us, and he was racing on a boat. He was there in St. Martin for the Heineken regatta. And he was there, and the first day happened. We went out and we watched it and everything. And I remember at, 14? That night I was like, I want to get on one of those boats. How do I get on one of those boats? And my mom and dad turned to me and they go, you go ask. It's like, but they're just going to say no. And they go, so you go to the next boat, you ask. And if they say no, you go to the next boat. So I literally went down, I went to the dock and I asked all the boats. Almost got myself on, if you're familiar with sailing and that, a J boat, which they were back in like World War I, World War II race boats, like really well known America's Cup boats. They were originally J boats in that. And then in World War I, I believe it is, they scrapped them all for the wood because they needed them for Navy ships. Then they've been rebuilding them over the years. And at the time, there was only like 2 or 3 in the world that had been rebuilt. I think there's now 4 or 5. And I almost got myself on one, but the captain goes, if the owner's on board, if he wasn't, I would take you on board in a heartbeat. I was like, ugh. So that was kind of a lift, but a deflate at the same time. None of the boats on the dock said yes. So I went back to the boat and I was like, oh, nobody said yes. And my mom went, well, why are you stopping? I was like, well, there's no more boats. She's like, look at all these boats on the moorings and on anchor. They're all racing. Go knock on their hull. And so I did. And also, I remember having that having a free offer. I had parents had just bought a digital camera, the old brick ones when they first were coming out, and they're like, take the camera, try not to destroy it, and take photos, and tell them put them on a DVD, and you'll give them to them at the end of the day. So I ended up getting myself on a 100-ton, 100-foot schooner, big, massive thing, and just raced on that for 3 days, taking photos and playing around and doing it. That started me with that whole don't take no for an answer. And so I think that also leads me into like the policing and that. I don't give up easy, sometimes to my detriment. But if you look at my marriage, my wife goes, you owe me one, just counseling. Just one more time of counseling. I went, okay, cool, because I don't give up easy. And so then that leads into the counselor was there, and the counselor's, saying all stuff. We say both of our sides, and she goes, you guys have stuff going on, but she's like, Chris, you're burned out. Your tank is below empty. And at the time, there was a lot of anti-police going on, especially in the States, and that. And first thing that popped in my head was, you hate cops. You want one less on the road. That's why you want me to take a break. And so it took me about 2 sessions to actually open up and say that. But again, that don't give up on yourself. I used to do stupid stuff on my motorcycle just to feel stuff. I used to, suicides really drained me down within the police. And so I was never going to do that. But I'd do stupid shit that I didn't care if it actually did cause something. And so it was on that step below. And so again, but that not giving up, you just don't give up on things until it's a mutual, no, there's just nothing here. And so, yeah, that's probably what I learned.
Here's another question there. So that's awesome, because I think I got like not just one answer, but multiple questions answered in that runaround. Because I got your parents, I got your wife. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what I could pull from that from what you just told is resiliency, communication with your wife, avoiding burnout, and in being open with yourself to the extent you can, right? Because everyone deals with some bullshit or some self-deception.
Yep.
And I think that was awesome. And so I got those questions. And there's one more question that I want to ask before we move on to the hammer is, when you're on the water, on the sailboat, what is that feeling that you're chasing?
Ooh, on the water.
What is your feeling that you have when you're on the boat?
Now or back then?
Now. It's fine. Whenever you come back to the water.
So when I come back to the water, it was interesting because I just finished at the time of this recording last week. So what would it be, about a week ago, I did my first multi-day yacht race on the boat that I race on now. And I was actually reflecting on this a lot during the trip, because I was like, does sailing bring me the happiness and joy that I thought it did? That it used to? because I do a lot of different things to fill my tank now, which I wish I had done during my policing. You know, I ride motorcycle, I paraglide, I yacht race, I spend time with my wife, you know, all these different kinds of things. But things for me is yacht racing, paragliding, and motorcycle riding. And I was sitting there and I was like, if I ranked the three of them at this current time, paragliding is probably the top. That fills me the most right now.
Well, it's not necessarily fills the most, right?
But what I feel when I'm out sailing.
Well, hang on. Let me rephrase the question here, because what does it feel like? What are you hitting at? What are you feeling? What are you chasing at when you're either on the water or in the air? Either one.
Calmness. It's not so much chasing. I guess it is. It's chasing. It's looking for. It's using. On all of them, all three of them, is that it would be the number one thing. You know, a lot of people would think, oh, you know, paragliding, yacht racing, motorcycle riding is all adrenaline. It's actually, I use it. It used to be adrenaline for me. That's what I used to seek. I used to seek that thrill, and that was destructive, extremely destructive. Especially on a motorcycle, because that's all I did. I rode a motorcycle every day to and from work, and I would seek the thrill. I would see how fast I could accelerate, see how fast I could go, how hard I could push around a corner. Now it's the calm. It's a continual search for the calm, because it calms my mind. Because I have a lot going on in my mind, running my own business, talking to people, wanting to make a difference, wanting to create less pain, all of that, for myself and others. So it's the calm.
There's a lot there that I think I want to dial in on maybe later, just because thrill versus calmness. And then also being a paratrooper myself, not a paraglider, but a paratrooper, jumping out of a plane is a violent act. Okay, don't let anyone else tell you it's not. And then when you're riding,
it's very violent.
You know, coming down, like after your chute's opened, provided you don't have any of the other isms with an airborne story. It's quite peaceful. It's nice. And then you hit the ground, and that's a whole other conversation. But we'll go ahead.
I always plan not to hit the ground as hard as a paratrooper. So
don't ever hit the ground as hard as a paratrooper. It hurts.
No. Yeah.
Anyway, we'll go now into the hammer.
Have screwed knees and backs.
That's a fact. It's a fact.
I come.
All right. So welcome to the hammer segment. The hammer is the first in our symbology that we go down. And don't worry, we don't have to worry about hitting the ground hard here. It's in this moment, right? It's kind of how I like to frame it is you start to use your influences, use the people who've influenced you. You're bringing your materials together. In this case, I think oddly enough in this story, I think in this conversation, we can call it your identities in some regard. I think bringing those together and unifying them. And then out of that, there's a why. We can talk about creation of why. And then you make your sword, right? The sword that's like behind me on top of my head. And then you can embody that and carry yourself forward. So before we get into some other things, who was a major influence in your life besides your immediate family and your wife, and why?
At what stage of life?
I would just say whatever is coming to your mind right now that's significant.
I've had multiple through my life. The one that pops into my head is an Italian guy, actually, that I first met in Panama sailing. And I don't know what it was about him, but he had a 55-foot carbon fiber cat that I was like, this is kind of cool. I don't know what drew me to him, but he just had that confidence to him. He would single hand this boat. And then I ended up actually a couple years later, ended up looking after his boat. And he paid me to look after his boat while he went back to Italy when we were in Tonga, when we were there for a long time. And he actually even offered me a job at one stage when I was like 17. And he's like, as you get older, just let me know and I'll hire you as captain of the boat. I was like, wow. But then I lost his details. But anyways, I go off. Yeah, so he kind of did, just because of that confidence side of stuff. That, you know, I always showed confidence when I was younger, but I never felt confident. And so just seeing that, so I'd always, you know, go off of that. And then the next person that pops into my head, who's now back in my life, is a guy named Andrew, nickname's Tiny. And when I was in Tonga, yeah, he's like 6'5" and like three times as big as me. Yeah. I remember I was in Tonga and we were there for 11 months. And at that stage, I was thinking about and wanting to do what's called the Vendée Globe, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's nonstop solo race around the world. Start in France, and you don't hit land until you either break something or you end up back in France. So you go all the way down and around the Antarctica and back up. And so I started wanting to move our boat around a lot on my own. And I remember seeing Tiny doing it. And so I was like, hey, that's confidence, man. I want to do that. So I just started mirroring him. And so it was that. And now he's back in my life. He got me onto the race boat that I'm on. And then the other, which everybody kind of know, well, there, again, different stages of life. When I was coming out of the police, and I was in a pretty dark place, and I came back to the US and did a 3-month motorcycle trip just to find myself again. This kind of forged me, I guess you could call it the hammer. It kind of started to forge me in that. I found a guy on Instagram whose Instagram handle is the One-Legged Monster. And he did powerlifting. He had lost below one of his knees. His last deployment, literally the last patrol, they hit an IED. And so he blew up his back, blew up the one good knee, blew up his arm. They had to amputate below his one knee. So he has no calf and shin down that side. And just watching him go through and do powerlifting comps and push through it all, and just all of his motivation, it inspired me. And it pushed me to keep going, because he'd talk about stuff all the time. And so, yeah, so that he was a big influence at that stage. And then as I've kind of carried on, Dwayne Johnson has always been kind of one for me as well. I watch him, and, in the power of our story, like we talked about at the beginning of this, I've run a video because he talks about not living from his identity or who he is to and then to knowing it, and then how he lives from it now. And you can see, he talks about his early movies and stuff. I remember listening to one of his videos, and I was going through some stuff work-wise with my business, and he was talking to the LA Lakers just before playoffs a few years back. And he was talking about his back against the wall. And it resonated with me, because I was like, every time my back gets against the wall, I just push. Like, I'm like, there is no other way besides forward. I don't go backwards or try and go over the wall. It's like, let's keep fighting. And so, those are kind of the different people. And at the moment, probably myself, just inspiring myself the best I can. I don't know if that answered your question, but
probably the corniest answer I've ever heard myself. No, I'm joking.
I mean, at the end of the day, though, if you don't inspire yourself and if you don't look up to yourself, what's the point?
I agree. And I think one of the things that I find interesting in this is I'm kind of like, already we start to see the attributes kind of being laid out there on the map in your story so far, right? And what I'm picking up is resiliency. Opposite side of the coin, burnout.
Yep. Oh, I've burned out hardcore.
Yeah, confidence, both like in others, and the lack of confidence in some of the things that you're doing. And then I would also say these identities, right? And I think one of the things I kind of wanted to dive into now is how. So this is going to be probably a weirdly worded question, because there's two parts of it, right? There's one part which is bringing together your identities, right? And maybe it's the same answer, but bringing apart your identities can be extremely difficult if we look at it that way, right? / how do we find our why? And how was that journey for you?
So here's the thing, and this is why my last inspiration is myself. Because throughout my journey, I was constantly seeking an external identity. I was trying to be who I thought I needed to be, not who I was. And so by trying to be a different person or a different identity or a different thing, you're constantly seeking external validation. It's great. You should grasp inspiration from others, but not try and be them, because you're not them. And that leads into your own identity and your why. You know, you've seen my masterclass on it, but for those obviously that haven't or that are listening, we take you through a journey that is literally first asking you, what is success? And then from there, we then ask the question, why? That's why it's called finding your why. And we go through all the layers and we dig deeper and deeper and deeper. And you get to a stage where it can no longer be logical. And I work with a lot of first responders or military or, and 95% of them struggle to go from the logical to the emotional, especially if they've been in the job for any time at all, because you have to shut some of that emotion away to deal with things our minds are not designed to see. You know, we're not designed to see death and destruction regularly. And so once you can go from that logical brain into the emotional, and even if you stop at the logical, just at that stage, you're going to transform. But then you go deeper and then you figure out where it comes from, why it's there, how it started. And instantly you go from, I'm trying to grab identities from other people to, oh my God, this is why I tick. This is who I am. And then what we do is we then take it and we turn it into a mission statement. And this is the thing that you live by. Like I said, mine is I create less pain for myself and others to create the best version of ourselves. Or I reduce pain in myself and others, or eliminate pain in myself and others to create the best version of ourselves. And as soon as I identified that, I no longer sought the identity of other people. Like when I was a cop, if I was training for SWAT, I thought of myself as a SWAT person. That's who I was. I'm the identity of the movie SWAT. I'm the identity of Will Smith as a cop, having all that fun, being the badass. Don't know if we can swear here, but anyways.
Right, we've already said some cuss words.
We've already done it.
Explicit content warning.
Explicit content warning. But, that's who I was trying to be. Instead of being myself and grabbing the aspects of that I found work for me. So, grabbing the aspects of the movie SWAT, that kind of thing to have, to kind of, see, oh, is that what I want to do? And apply the levels of my why to that, or to talking to people in those different roles. And I can guarantee if I had known this when I first joined law enforcement or the police, I'd still probably be a cop today and I wouldn't have burned out. I should rephrase that. Knowing this and applying it, if I had applied this, I would probably most likely still be in the police. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it answered it.
Cool.
Yeah, you answered it. I'm just trying to look at it because I had to kind of sum it up a little bit, and make sure what I heard is what you said. I know it sounds weird, but just bear with me. So let me know if I'm off here, right? Mm-hmm. And I think this is what I'm picking up is your why should not be linked to an external validation or an external identity that requires the validation of other people, right? So if I sit here and say sailing is part of my identity, right, that is not part of what people should be validating. It's something that I validate through a series of and I'm going to use your language here, make sure I get this right. And I've also done your exercise, your levels of why, right? but the issue here is it as you said earlier, I don't know if this is the issue, but you if you dive down, just a few levels deep, and you attach yourself to the logic, because it's just sometimes what people do, then that's useful, and you can transition through something else, and you can use that to help you, right? And that's great. Now, if you attach yourself, and this is kind of where I want to apply my lessons learned from your process, is you really have to dial in on a feeling, and it's not necessarily that feeling. Well, it's I'm not going to say that. It's a feeling that's associated with what you've written so far, and there's a leap there that it's a difficult thing to take. So I guess one thing, and maybe that right there is what helps, and let me know if I'm off here, is that what helps bring in the internal identities together? Yeah. Because now you've created this stratification, this hierarchy of why, all the way down, we'll say the bottom or the top, however we want to make this triangle. And then we can start having differing layers of fun.
Yeah. So the top kind of few layers, I have found they change a little bit depending on the stage of your life. But once you get into the emotional levels, it doesn't so much change. So those bottom kind of 3 to 4 levels. And how we do it is we go through, and when you start to kind of repeat yourself, where you feel like, hey, I can't go any deeper, there's nothing deeper here, then we go, then I ask you, what emotion, what's the top emotion that's coming up? And this can be a big struggle for a lot of people, because, or challenge, I should more say, because that emotion, you might say happiness, but it might actually come from a painful place. It might come from a lacking place. And normally it comes from a childhood lacking place, because of something that's happened. What I've found is very few people's why and mission statement comes from a place of happiness and joy. 95% of the time comes from a place of pain. It comes from a place of discomfort as a child, as a very young child. And so what we do is you take that feeling, and you go back and you find the first time you felt that feeling. And then you ask that kid at that time the why questions. And that's where you start to get into the real you and the real things that serve you. Because so many of us go into jobs going, this is going to serve us. And when we go in, it does. It's exciting. I remember my first year in the police. I was like, everybody should do this. This is so much fun. I'm helping people. I'm making a difference. I'm, changing lives. I'd spend extra time on things. But then I lost that because I couldn't articulate it. And so I started to serve the police, and it started to drain me. And that's when you start to get into burnout, because you feel like everything's sucking from you. It can even be your relationship, your partner. My wife knows my why. I know her why. Hers is to create experiences and memories, all to create joy. And so, as you've seen mine, but I have some layers in there of that. But so if I'm in pain, I will go, hey, and pain's quite a strong word. I like it because it's such a strong word. But pain can just be discomfort, or it can be I'm having a down day, or I need to just go fill my tank up a little bit. So I'll tell her, hey, I'm going to go do this. And so she knows that. But at the same time, she knows that the other side of my mission statement, my why, is for others. So if she's feeling some pain or feeling some discomfort, she'll tell me, Chris, you're spending so much time on just yourself. I'm feeling like I'm a bit out here. So the communication side. So it causes that communication. But the emotions, we got to get into the emotional side, because then we know what we need. And if we don't, most people don't actually know what they need. They think from all these things that they see from social media, wherever my phone is, social media, all these different things. Oh, I need that to feel fulfilled. I need this to fulfill. Nobody actually knows what they actually need. Or very few people do, is what I'm finding.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Okay, so I think that's a good look at the hammer, and I think there's some next questions that I have kind of deal with the making of the sword, right? Or the sword that we've made so far. And we'll go ahead and transition into the sword. All right. So far, so good?
So far, so good. Love it.
Perfect. So, ladies and gentlemen, for anyone watching, make sure that you like, comment, subscribe to Meaningforge. You can find us here on YouTube, of course. And then if you're listening to the audio version, this is on Buzzsprout, and then it should be on every major platform, Spotify, iTunes podcast, and Google Podcast. So feel free to subscribe, comment, give a rating of 5 stars, and most importantly, share with your friends and family, because this is really what that's how you get the word out and get the stories like Chris's out to people that can make an impactful change in their life pursuits. So the sword, right? So we're here now. We've kind of, I think, gone through this forging process, right? And there's lots of things I've learned about that I don't think we're beyond the hammer. We've made our sword, and the major ingredient here is the why, right? And then I think you kind of started alluding to it at the end of the hammer, which is kind of like the mission statement. Yeah. And because now, like, you've made yourself, you can carry yourself around, all that fun stuff. And for me, the sword, it sounds more like a mission statement, because the reason why is because you have to you use your sword now to make decisions and to make judgments and to cut certain things and to not cut certain things, right? So you see how this analogy really builds on itself quite well. And I guess the first thing I want to make sure is, how do you know you've crafted a good sword? Like what are you looking for in your mission statement?
So we go through, and we didn't go through it on Power of Our Story, the last session a couple weeks ago, but we will later this week when we do it. But for the listeners and viewers, how we take it is, so when you get into that deep level, you'll get into it and you'll feel it. You'll get emotional, you'll get tears, you'll get goosebumps, you'll be like, oh my God, how did I not know this before? And so that's your deep level of your why. And then creating your mission statement literally is taking its I, and then it's your final level of your why. So mine's creating less pain for myself, and you start with I, and then myself and others. So I, and then whatever that is, your why is, myself and others, to create. And then the create part is, through the journey, you'll recognize a common thread or a common trend that you do. And you'll recognize what you consistently are wanting to do or serve, or manifest as such. And so mine is, the best version of ourselves, because I'm always, and so through the process, we'll take this, or we'll take that why, that at the bottom level, your why, and to test it, make sure you're there. You start to look through your life. What's a better tester than your own life? Because you've lived it, you've experienced it, the best that you have. So what you do is you take and you go from childhood, from when it first started, and you start to look at it. So mine, creating less pain. Okay, cool. Toddler. Okay, cool. I was always, I would just stick to myself and not create pain for other people, and I wouldn't run off and I wouldn't do things. So I'm told from my parents. And then as I got older into my teenage years, early teens, not even early teens, pre-teens, my brother got bullied, and I didn't like bullies. And so I went up and stood up against the bully that bullied him. The guy ended up protecting my brother after that. Then as I got into my early teens and I was in school, how there's the cliques in schools and that, which I didn't recognize this until after I left. But I would always bring people together, because I didn't like to see a lower thing. I mean, there was the high, I called them the rich and popular people. And then there was everybody else. And turns out, from a friend of mine, after the year after I left, it all kind of fell apart. And she was like, you kept everything together. And I was like, oh, okay. Never really clicked on any of it until I started doing this process. And then as I got older in age, my sailing, I used to, every time there was kids around together, I'd always bring everybody together so that we were all having fun, because being alone, a kid on a boat alone, is not so much fun. For me, it wasn't very, it was pretty, it was pretty lonely. I'm a people person. I like to be around people. So then I'd create less pain there. Then once I was in the police, it was all about creating less pain for people. It was all about, turn up and give everything I have to you so that, you become a better person. Because I want you to be a better person so we don't have to come back here. I don't want to take you to jail. I want you to become a better person so you're a better person for society. And then fast forward to me leaving the police, it actually came down to the fact of I was creating so much pain to everybody else around me that it was creating a monster amount of pain for myself. And so I became a shell of me. And once I actually tested this through my life, I was like, oh my God, wow. Like, and you take, for example, that train crash that caused me to want to join the police. They were creating the least amount of pain possible. And once I recognized this, I was like, wow, everything clicks together. And so that's how you take you take and test it against yourself. And then the mission statement is literally just needs to be I, whatever it is, myself and others, because you want to make sure yourself is first. If you're not first, you're draining and you'll feel like everybody else drains you. Everything will serve. You'll be serving everything else first, and you'll never be serving yourself. We've got to serve ourselves first. What we do has to serve us in some way. And it sounds pretty selfish, but it's supposed to. Because if we're not somewhat selfish, how can we actually fully 100% turn up to people? And then it's whatever you want to create. That part, you'll know by this stage, you'll know what it is that you want to create for yourself and others. There is a little bit of a process that I go through in my higher end group in that to define that by using values and what's serving you and what doesn't. But you'll have an inclination of what it is. The struggle, though, then is to take that, and we're talking about the sword, is to take that and actually use it as the sword. Because you can forge a sword, but if you never put a handle on it and never learn how to swing it, you may as well just leave it in the
exactly, right. So I guess there's a few questions that we could go down, and I think I just want to keep it to maybe one or two. One is, how do you learn to use the sword appropriately? Because we don't want it to be, one of the reasons where this analogy came from was the idea that, we can use a sword as a tool of judgment, for better and for worse, right? We can hurt people with our sword, with our words, with how we act and how we carry those things. And how do we learn to use the sword appropriately?
So this is quite a powerful stage of it all, because if you take you take this why, and it can be very destructive. And what I've found is that a lot of people actually subconsciously know it, but can't articulate it. Like we talked about at the very beginning, you can't articulate what it is. So I've started to refer to it like, because I work with obviously a lot of law enforcement and police and that it's like blindfolding yourself, having somebody point you at a target and them telling you to shoot the target. The Glock 17, you got 17 rounds, you'll probably hit it a few times, but you don't actually know. And a lot of people actually are more blindfolded, spun around in circles, and then told to hit the target. And they have no idea where the target actually even is. And so how you take it and you apply it, and this can be, so what ends up happening is you start to feel like your why or your mission statement, if you're not able to articulate, you feel like it's destructive against you. And so you start to run from it. But then once you articulate and you figure out the meaning and where it comes from, you can then take it and you can go, okay, what do I want to do with this? And it's just like anything in life. Everything happens, I believe everything happens for us. And you can decide whether a bad experience is a bad experience or not. You can make the choice. We are humans. We're allowed to make choices. So what you have to do is you have to decide and make a choice on what you want to do with this. Do you want to use this in a destructive manner or not? Now, some people won't realize they're doing it in a destructive manner because they're only focused on the me. So that's why it says myself and others, because you're consistently applying it to yourself, then others. And you go through that. And I actually turn it into a question. How am I creating less pain for myself and others to create the best version of ourselves? And I'll ask that question of myself consistently. And I was having this conversation with my wife last week, and she's like, do you actually ask yourself that all the time? I was like, yeah, I'll be sitting on the couch and you'll be banging around in the kitchen. I'll be like, fuck, should I get up? Because it sounds like she's in pain because she's pissed off about something possibly. And she goes, really? I was like, yeah. And so I go, okay, myself, am I creating less pain for myself by sitting here on the couch watching TV? Well, actually, I'm in a pretty good place. So I don't need to be sitting here on the couch. Now, how about for others? Well, the only other person here at the moment is my wife. So for others would be my wife. Shit, actually, for me, I'm getting that vibe or that feeling that I should be doing more for her. And that takes a bit to get used to. But it's that she's over there, you know, if I'm honest with myself, you know, I should probably get up and unstack the dishwasher and, you know, put the dishes away. And so I go, oh, okay, sweet, get off your lazy ass, Chris, and go do it. Because otherwise it's going to create a worse version of us. And so that's in a real quick thing, and it takes a process to be able to do it. And obviously I've got a program that goes through all of this kind of stuff and make sure that you are doing it right. But that's the first step. You know, that would be the first step that I tell people to do, is just start asking it as a question instead of just a statement.
That's it's like a litmus test, right? It's quick.
Exactly.
It's a quick litmus test, and that gets people in and out the door. It's like, okay, here's my why, and then all of a sudden it's like, all right, here's my mission statement, and am I fulfilling this? Yes or no? Like, just real quick. I don't need data and analytics and stuff like that to know. I just need to know very simply yes or no, and then yes for myself,
and be honest with yourself.
Yeah. And
that's the difficult part, and that's where that takes training and that takes coaching to be able to do, because most people are not honest with themselves. I tell all my clients, be brutally effing honest. If somebody asks you how your day is going and you're feeling like crap, tell them I'm feeling like crap, but I'm doing something about it. So always end it as I remember, I forget what it was. I was doing something and somebody's like, the shit sandwich. Something good, the shit, and then something good. And so if you use the shit sandwich, it works really well. But it's because, you know, a lot of people won't be honest if they're having a crap day, because they're like, oh, I don't want to put the pressure on somebody else, and they care about everybody else instead of, again, myself first. If you're feeling like crap, tell somebody. It's what I did, and I learned this when I was on my motorcycle trip when I went on leave without pay, when I was literally a shell of myself. I was like, I need to go find, with counselors' help, I need to go find myself again. And so me, I'm an outcome-driven person. I am, you know, let's get stuff done. I'm, you know, again, the whole sailing thing going around, my purpose, my outcome is I want to get on one of these damn boats. Mm-hmm. So when I left and I did the thing, it wasn't just everybody's like, oh, you get to go on this holiday. You're so lucky. And I was like, this ain't no holiday, brother. Sometimes they're not. Let's make stuff happen. Yeah, it looks like a holiday, but I'm on a tight budget, and I'm here for a reason. And if I look back on it, I'm here to create less pain for myself at the biggest level, because I've been doing it for everybody else and not myself.
All right. Well, hey, that I think solves the sword question. And now we've gone through our meaning forge so far. We've made a sword. We are carrying the sword, and now we're going to go into the pen. Mm-hmm. All right, so the pen. Not too fancy. I only have 2 questions here because it's the only standardized thing, right? Some people, when they talk about their why and they talk about their significance, they'll talk about like we have, we'll go all the way back to an early memory or something like that. I've found that it's also useful to go all the way to the end of someone's life. And not only go to the end of someone's life, but go well into the future to where nothing remains but the essence of that thing. And that typically has some interesting answers. So 2,000 years in the future, Chris Chandler-Yates is gone. Very gone.
I'm gone.
Like his bones might be fossilized if he's lucky. That's like a billion chance anyway.
I'll be a T-Rex.
So now you're what do you want people, the essence of your idea? Like if you could sum it up, like what's the essence that you want people to remember 2,000 years from now about you and why?
I remember you said that this was going to be a question, and I've thought about it a lot.
Perfect.
And I've come up with pretty much the same thing. I don't really know. And the reason I say that is because at the end of the day, I don't do this to be known for something. I'd do this again, the end of my mission statement, to create a better version of ourselves. If I just change one person, I remember I'll tell you a little story again. I like stories, as you guys can probably tell. I remember fighting, and it wasn't so much around this mission statement stuff. It was more around just helping cops become better people, helping people get into the police and not burn out from the trauma that we see and deal with. And that's where I kind of started with all my business and everything, was helping people join the police force and give them the mental tools. And then that's when I found this why and purpose side of things and really started teaching that there as well. And I remember I was like talking to all these different people, and people just wouldn't sign up. I'm like, I just want to help everyone. I want everyone to get what I have because I know it'll make a massive difference. I remember being at a Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi giving back to affiliates kind of thing. And I knew the lady who helped create the program, Knowledge Business Brokers, a few years back. And I was in Vegas at the time when they ran this event, and she invited me as a +1. And I was like, oh, sweet, cool. Luckily you told me before I came so I could bring a suit. And I was there, and Lewis Howes, I don't know if you know who Lewis Howes is. He's an ex-football player and now runs a podcast and stuff as well. But he was there, and he won one of the top things. And he was up there, and he told this story, and a lot of people know it. And it's a starfish story. It's a starfish analogy kind of thing. And how it goes is there's an old guy walking down a beach, and there's starfish all over. The tide's going out. There's starfish all over this beach that are all drying out and dying. And further up, you can see a kid on the beach. And as he gets closer, you can see the kids throwing starfish back into the ocean. And the old man walks up to the kid and goes, a young kid, probably, under 10. And he walks up to the kid and he goes, son, what are you doing? And he goes, I'm saving the starfish. And he goes, but you're not going to be able to save all the starfish. And the kid reaches down, picks up a starfish, throws it in the ocean. He goes, doesn't matter. I saved that one. And that really resonated with me, is that if I can save one starfish or one person, if I can help one person, that's all that I care about. Because that person will go on and do whatever they're doing. But at the end of the day, if in 2,000 years somebody says, I've heard about this Chris, he helped one person, that's what matters. If I made one impact on one person, a positive impact, that's all that matters. I guess that that's probably my thing, is just making an impact. Doesn't have to be on everybody. I'd love for it to be on everybody and all law enforcement, but if it's just one person, that's what really matters.
All right. So in 2,000 years from now, you just want a story, a parable. Good job, Jesus. On starfish.
Hey,
starfish. I get it.
One starfish,
That's the joke. That's a little joke, It was good. It was good.
Yeah. That was a good one. I like that.
So I have one more question concerning this. And it's 2,000 years in the future. They're doing an archaeological dig on like your house or something like that, right? What is the one item? One item. It can only be one item that you want them to find, and why? It could be anything, by the way.
Yeah, I'm not going to overcomplicate this. A dumbbell.
Why a dumbbell?
Why a dumbbell? Fitness saved my life. So I used to, again, it kind of goes back to that whole things serving you versus you serving them. when I was in the police and I was in my dark times where I didn't care about other people really all that much, but yet I would give everything to other people. I would go to the gym angry and I would let it all out in the gym. I would let everything out. And that was my sanctuary where I was alone and safe. And I'd call it to, fill myself up. But it saved me. Because it was my place to let things out that was going through myself. And even at the time, I didn't realize it necessarily, but I recognized it about a year just after I got back from my motorcycle trip, refining myself. I was in the gym training and I went home, and the next morning woke up and I went, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to use the boxing bag. So I went to the gym and I used the boxing bag. And for the first time in a very long time, I used the boxing bag for joy, not to let out anger. And so when I think about, a dumbbell being around, it's a thing of fulfillment, and I now use the gym to fulfill me. I use the gym. I don't get used by the gym. And so if somebody could learn just by finding a dumbbell in my house and go, oh yeah, the gym can help me. The gym can make a difference for me. That would probably be it. I mean, I train regularly, consistently, but I don't have to have the gym. There's a difference. I feel like a lot of people have to have the gym, and when they don't have it, they feel lost. And that's when you're serving the gym, not the gym serving you. I'm all about figuring out how to be served by something and not serving it. Is that clear as mud?
No, it's very clear, actually.
Cool.
It's perfectly clear. Okay. All right. Hey, so thank you so much for the pin. That's leaving, again, sharing. It's kind of like it's part of the mission statement, right? But it's like writing it down, right? Putting it in the books, putting it in things, leaving your mark on the community or something like that, leaving your mark on someone. It's always, that's what the pin is. So appreciate you sharing that. And we will now go into the crown, and heavy is the head that wears the crown. Okay. So in the crown, right, that is effectively, heavy is the head that wears the crown. It is the burden of responsibility, not only to yourself, right, but to others. And maybe burden isn't the right word or something like that in the context of this conversation. But in some cases, you do have to have. I think it's funny how you say your mission statement is to create less pain in your life and in others. And I think I butchered that a little bit, right?
Close.
Yeah.
Right.
Sorry about that.
Same meaning. Same meaning.
One of the things that I look at is taking on that responsibility and kind of that pain in a decision, right? And I think we kind of talked about that earlier a little bit. Is it destructive or is it helpful? And that's a mindset shift in some regards, right? And you call it whatever you want, because pain can be good, right? Especially if you're working out, like in a dumbbell.
It's necessary. Pain is necessary. You can't have good without pain.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I had like a little lightning bolt kind of go off to the side and go somewhat. Yeah. I would say it's probably more sufficient, but that's fine. That's like philosophy terms. So yes, I would agree with you. And then one of the things that I'm kind of looking at is the dumbbell. And we hear this all the time, right? I create this X and now I'm a slave to X. I take this job and now I'm a slave to this job. I do whatever automation or something like that. And I think it's really interesting because I had someone else on my show, and we talked about, and one of his things was processes should support people, not processes supporting. Processes should support people, not processes supported by people, or something like that, right?
People shouldn't support processes. Processes should support people.
Yep, close enough. And that's something that I kind of want to dial in on, especially as we talk about leading ourselves, right? And preventing, because like in my notes, I kind of have like burnout. Like this might be an area to discuss burnout and why that's important to be disciplined against. So how do we create a process or a system that always kind of leads us to a better outcome, or at least a better outcome?
Yeah, well, it's so true. You know, this all started because I burned out. You know, it's why my podcast is called Fight the Burnout, because it's all about, this is how we prevent ourselves from burning out. Because you burn out because you feel like you're being drained by everything and everyone. That's when you burn out. You know, you're physically and emotionally drained. It's burnout. But if you don't know how to get out of that, or you don't even know who you are, how are you supposed to actually figure out what serves you, or what process serves you, or creates you, or helps you? And so by going through the process, you figure out who you are, who you actually are within. So many people, as we've talked about, don't know who they are. And so again, it's quite simple, actually. You find that mission statement and you question it. And you start with me. And then you go to others. And if you don't feel like me is getting served, change it. And I make that sound extremely easy and extremely simple, but it is not. It takes a process. It takes coaching. It takes bringing yourself back in, because it doesn't matter how old you are. The older you get, actually, the more you have things concreted in, the habits. And so you're actually trying to rewire a habit. Because we have been raised from a very young age, give to everybody else. You think about as a kid, share your toy, make him feel good so you can, share your toy. Don't be mean, share your toy. And yes, you need to share your toy, but if you're feeling like consistently like that toy's being taken away from you, you're going to start fighting it more and more and more and more, and become more and more angry and more resentful. And the last thing you're going to want to do is share the toy. You're going to throw the toy and break it, because you're like, screw it, nobody can have it. Welcome to burnout. Destroy everything around you. Self-sabotage. So the number one thing is just question your mission statement against yourself and then others. Would be my number one thing to make sure that you're being served. And what I take people through is, like I said, every level matters. So you take, for example, and I talk about career a lot because it's, it's where we are most of the time. We spend more time at work or asleep than we do anywhere else or doing anything else. More time at work than even sleep for a lot of people. And when you go to apply for a job, they'll ask you a bunch of questions, correct? They'll sit there and they'll go, yeah, this, blah, blah, blah. Tell me about yourself. Tell me this and that. Well, if you can actually take those levels of your why and apply them to different scenarios that you did, and then give that to them, you've just shown them even more. The next thing that you can do is, when they give you the opportunity to ask questions, you can ask how your why can get served. I think about mine, flexibility and freedom. So when I did a job for last year to kind of test some things out and see if I wanted to go down a different direction of going to financial advising, when I first signed up, I was like, what's the culture like? And then I also asked, what's the what kind of free, flexibility in hours and stuff like that am I going to be working? How easy is it to get time off? How easy is it to get leave? Because my thing is, I want to be able to travel at the drop of a hat. Somebody says, shit, Chris, I want you to come learn this new stuff. I want you to come to this masterclass. I want to be able to go, sweet, let's go. That's why I work so hard as well, because I've been invited to things and they go, no. And I go, I don't have the financial freedom to do that. So you can apply it to those different things, and that's how you start to serve it. Everything starts to serve you. You take health and fitness, for example, and we take you through all of this. Again, I'm going to put a little plug in here for my stuff. I hope that's okay, Jim.
Please. It's
But
all
for
about
my program called Productive AF, or Productive as,
we get
it. Is it's all about creating productivity within yourself, because if you can create productivity in yourself in your own mind, then externally it's extremely easy. And so we talk about, career, health and fitness, joy, your relationships, communication. And so if we take fitness, which again, we talked about the dumbbell, I'm huge on fitness side of stuff. This morning, I didn't get out of bed and go train, but I woke up when my alarm went off and I went, I am sore AF right now because I did 2 workouts, one in the morning yesterday and then one with my buddy when he came around, who I used to be in the police with. I'm sore AF and I'm tired, even though I'm wide awake. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to give my body a rest for another hour. And then I got up and I went, okay, well, I'm not going to the gym, but I'm going to go for that run that I needed to do anyways. So I got up and went for a quick 25-minute run, came home, had a shower, hopped on here. But once I made that decision and I applied it to my why, my mission statement, I was like, oh yeah, sweet, cool. Because I was in pain physically. And I was like, if I go to the gym, I'm just going to cause more pain to myself, not in a good way. So yeah, that's be what I'd probably say.
Oh, that's a good answer. You were good, man. You were great.
All of this is, it makes it, when we talk about it and, we make it sound extremely easy. And as you're shaking your head, Jim, it's not easy, but I make it sound easy because I live, eat, and breathe it. And the times that I don't live, eat, and breathe it, I start to burn out. I look at myself, and it still happens, but I look at myself this year, I've really, really dedicated myself to living, eating, and breathing it and nothing else. I'm like, nope, this is it. Whatever is serving me and serves this mission statement happens. And so if I look back and I rewind myself to, this time, probably, February last year, my business was going berserk. I had a good coach. I was going, training, lots of clients, all this kind of stuff, right in the middle of the pandemic, when people were supposedly, out of work and all this kind of stuff. It was just going berserk. I was, again, had fallen into that misery side because I wasn't serving me. I was giving everybody else and I was creating all this less pain for everybody else, but I wasn't actually putting in process for me. I'd fallen back into that cycle again. So I went into financial advising, was enjoying it. Then we went into another lockdown. I learned exactly what the role was that I was going to be doing. And I went, I believe wholeheartedly in insurance, life insurance, trauma insurance, income protection, all of that. But the doing of the job, I was like, this doesn't inspire me. This does not serve my creating less pain, the doing of it. The end result of, getting that financial payout, I've seen what can be caused by financial stress and that being a cop. Shit, that creates a lot less pain. So I still send people to the brokerage that I used to work for because I know the importance of it. But the doing did not create me less pain. It did not serve all layers of my why. It did not, benefit me in the way that I needed it to. Now I went, coaching still does. So why have I stepped away from this? Because I had put processes in place to make sure that it was serving me. So when I went to go resign, the directors went, why, who did something was one of the directors' answers. Who did something? I want to know. I was like, no, nobody did anything. This doesn't inspire me. I teach people to do what inspires them and live from their purpose. And he was like, I can respect that. The other directors, same thing. Because they understand it, and I was able to articulate it and articulate why. So it sounds really easy, but there's a process to get to it. And that's where the coaching side comes in. Knowing your purpose and your why is going to get you 100 times better than probably where you are now. but actually being able to live by and implement it and being able to bounce things off, you're in and amongst it. You're in the emotions of it. So a lot of times you can't see past the fence. Whereas when you have a coach that knows it, like I do myself, and I'm going to drop another little plug in here for me as I know it's okay, Jim. But when a coach looks from 30,000 feet and they don't tell you what to do, they ask questions. Because I don't know what's good for you, Jim. You know what's good for you, but I can know how to ask the right questions. And that's the difference, is to implement this and actually live by it. And that's the whole crown as such, is you can have this, but that crown will get really heavy if you don't have a strong enough neck, if you don't have a strong enough body, if you can't carry it.
My metaphor is way too much now.
I love metaphors. I love metaphors.
You're spot on, man. And what I love about it is you were able to even go into questions that I was about to ask. So thanks so much for doing that. How do we overcome self-deception? That's a big one. Like, how do we overcome the bullshit mirror? That's a big one. And then, it's leading organization, leading people. It's, what's inspiring you. And if that's a key thing, right? And if you're coming to work and you're not inspired, you might need to look for another job. And then I agree with you, leading with your why. Like, I love how you did it too. Like, so I think it's funny, people who kind of know their why will do this. As what I've noticed is, tell me about yourself. And then they lead with the why. 9 times out of 10. And that's only about as many people as I've found who have a why. They
not many people can articulate it. There's not many people that can actually articulate it.
And the conversation is different. The conversation is just different. Like, you're able to get into a deeper conversation with someone that you may not even know, and not do it naively. Right. And that's a key thing. And especially because people, they'll carry their swords and they'll all that fun stuff. And they may, not everybody's a good actor, or sometimes not everybody's a good actor, or they don't even know it, or they're a bad actor and they don't even know it. So I think this really does the crown justice, and heavy is the head that wore that crown. And we will go ahead and start wrapping things up.
Cool. I will just.
All right. So we've gone through the meaning forge, and this is my time to kind of sum it up just briefly. Right. We have a great story for Chris. All right. Grew up, world traveler, I would say, at least on the Pacific side of the world. And joined the police department, met his wife, do all those other things. And really, it's in this moment that you start to challenge your external identities and start to realign them. And this is my take on the story. Let me know if I'm off. Right.
I started after I actually left the place is when I started to challenge them.
Yeah. So you're challenging these external identities, and from that we start going into the hammer. And in the hammer, we talked briefly about some of the people who influenced you. Right. Resiliency is a key thing here. Confidence is a key thing here. And then we talked about getting to your why. Right. Getting the right materials to the forge to start forging away your sword that you would embody, which later becomes your mission statement. And that was a great conversation too, because then from the sword, we start talking about how you use it, how you use that mission statement to live a better life so things serve you. And that's only solidified in the pen, where Chris embodies his inner Jesus and tells a parable of a starfish. And the essence of that was to help one person, right? And I think that's what everybody wants to see at some point, is to help one person. And from that, we talk about dumbbells and why, and I'm going to kind of just take the leap into the crown, which we talk about processes support people, not people supporting processes. And it's a key thing for a leader and a key thing for someone who's driven to have their mission statement and stuff like that. So that way they are inspiring themselves. They can do a litmus test of things around them to make sure that they serve the team, they serve like the person, and then they can go off and be, I don't want to say a contributor to society, but just they can go off and help people. They can go off and live. And as I said earlier, Chris helps people live their best versions of themselves. Right. And that's the key thing here. And all of that thing, you're just pulling all the stories, all the aspects here that we can get in this, believe it or not, short interview, into all this. And we have a pretty reasonable understanding of who Chris is and what his mission statement is in life. And so in the summary, we kind of do a few more things, some bullshit questions, of course. And before we get into that, Chris, where can people find you at? And what like if people want to look for you and get in contact with you, how can they do that?
Probably easiest way is LinkedIn, and it's just Chris Chandler-Yates with a hyphen. For the Chandler and the Yates, or you can email me at team@createfromwhy.com. That'll be probably the easiest. I'm on Instagram at Knocking Demon Coaching, and also Create From Why, but that's going to be changing. Some of those might be changing here soon. So the easiest way is either email me or find me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn won't ever change, so you don't have to worry about that. I will add in there, you said you touched on a few things there on the leadership side of stuff. And what I'll say to somebody who doesn't, that maybe you've gone through the process, you've done my stuff and you've seen it and you've gone, okay, cool, I've done all this stuff, but I don't actually know what's out there that is going to serve me as career-wise. And I'm going to give away even more here. I love to give and over-deliver. But in the program, we take you through all this into depth, but what it is it's actually shifting the language and your focus around stuff, because what you're doing, you probably started it for a reason. It most likely served what you did. Now, if it's just a filler job, okay, cool, that's different. But if you're in a career, say the police or military or a corporate job or something you've been in, like something in that field for a while, and you're like, I'm being drained by this and all that. Once you find your why and your purpose, you can then start to focus on it again. You can then start to look for it. And as a leader, especially, which I believe managers should not be managers, they should be leaders. And we hear this all the time from multiple different people. But as that leader, you should be inspiring people to actually do that as well. And also, but you got to lead by example. So it's actually taking and focusing. If I take, for example, the financial advising job that I was doing, not completely all there, especially in the beginning, but I found the things that did apply to it. And there's different processes to it. So I just wanted to drop that in there as well, Jim, because it was just something that kind of, when you were giving a summary, really hit home with me, that people really need to realize that it's okay to not know if what you're doing is serving you, but you can always test it against that why, the levels of the why and the mission statement. And you can also change and find it. I believe that anything that you do can serve your why and mission statement. It's just the amount and the level.
All right. Well, I appreciate that for sure. And from a leadership perspective, it's hard because there's a culture out there that leaders just give. And we're not going to dive into that. We're going to dive into some bullshit questions now. So
we could do a whole nother episode on that one.
Favorite part about your dual citizenship.
So what's my favorite part? I can go to certain countries that do not like the US on my New Zealand passport.
Which ones are those?
Like if you were to go to the Middle East, I'd say probably, but I haven't actually found that so much. It's more of just the ease of travel. Like, just having that, the favorite part of having the dual citizenship is just that ease of travel in and out of New Zealand, Australia, the US without having to worry about visas. I can just fly and come back and don't have to think about stuff. New Zealand's an amazing country. It's very gorgeous and there's lots here, but I love the States and certain things around the States and the vastness. And doing that trip that I did, you really realize, I've drove cross country before I left the States, so I kind of knew it already from a teenager, but doing it as an adult in that state I was in, there's just every 15 minutes it changes. I'm like, wow. And New Zealand, I don't find it does that as much. The South Island's a little bit different, but I'd say the best thing about the dual citizenship is just the ease of travel.
So all of the people who at least somewhat on my channel know for a fact that I've cited Lord of the Rings multiple times.
Yep. I've never been to Hobbiton, so don't ask me about it.
Have you read the books at least?
Not really. I've seen the movies, but I haven't read the books.
There we go. That's fine.
Yeah.
I
know all about it. I know where they were filmed and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, you got to go out there at least a little bit. Maybe take a ride or something. I don't know. Go find Edoras or something.
I've rode right past it. I've just never actually paid to go into it because I'm like, whatever. But if you come down, Jim, I'll take you there. How's that sound?
Perfect. Actually, if I come down there, let them say, let's go on a boat and have some fun there. And then the next question is, in the States, I'm not going to say in the States, but what is your favorite sports?
Favorite sports? As in team sports or?
Team sports.
Oh, favorite team sports. See, I grew up, my dad was a rock climber and paraglider and that. So I didn't really do a whole lot of team sports, but if I was going to go to a team sport or watch a team sport, it would be football.
Okay, which team? And we're talking American football, right?
Yeah, we're talking American football, not soccer. No, my wife's family's huge soccer. Like they all, no. It's just I can't fake a kick and fall on the ground, and it's too much drama. But no, American football or rugby. Rugby is quite fun to watch as well. But American football. Now that I'm here, it got me into it. Actually, at Police College got me into it because it's all the guys were watching was rugby, so I had to. But American football is San Francisco 49ers. Always has been. I'm from Northern California, dude. I'm about 4 hours north of San Francisco. Actually, there's a story there, but I won't go into it about why it's the San Francisco 49ers. But
if you can make it 20 seconds or less.
20 seconds or less. What was I? About 7. They did a betting sweepstakes, and you could win a can of Coke. And it was Dallas Cowboys versus the 49ers. I bet on the Dallas Cowboys, and the 49ers won, so the 49ers became my team moving forward.
I get that. I get that.
And then turns out that they actually were from at the time I had no idea where they're and then it turned out they were San Francisco, so they're actually closest to my hometown and that as well.
That's all right. I'm a Panthers fan, so I suck now. I suck real bad, so it's okay.
And at the time, it was Joe Montana, and then I ended up with a Joe Montana card. My dad actually got me a signature from Joe Montana and stuff as well. So it kind of does,
All right. And then the last question before we go into final words is, what are top three books that you'd recommend someone read?
Top 3 books. I'm not a huge reader, but the top 3 books I would say would be that have made the most impact to my life would be Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement. Made a massive difference. Grit, the book Grit, was quite an interesting read. I actually read that just after my motorcycle trip, which was quite interesting. And what would be the other one? I was already doing the why stuff, but Start With Why by Simon Sinek is a good one. It just puts things into perspective, opens things up a little bit. I don't necessarily believe in the way that he helps you find your why, but it is a good book to open your mind to even more information about your why and purpose.
Well, I think you and I had a conversation about this, a few weeks ago where we were talking. It's like, it's good that multiple people have this out there, so that multiple people read different things differently and all that other fun stuff. That's why we have different coaches. That's why we have different books, So go out, read. That's the important part. Talk to people, and that's what matters. So, as always,
I'm going to drop a 4th book real quick. Sorry, it just popped in my head. Mike Tyson's, is it his autobiography? or biography on Mike Tyson. I listened to that audiobook while I was riding around the South Island last year, and that is mind-blowing. That man, it's definitely a book to listen to or read. But yeah, I'll drop that one there.
Perfect. So we got 4 books. We have a 49ers fan. We have some weird stuff that, has no idea what Lord of the Rings really is because he hasn't read the books. It's okay. I haven't read it all the way either. It hasn't even been there. Just living the dream. It hasn't even been there. But on top of all that, he does sail and he does paraglide. And so that's important. And not as important as Lord of the Rings, though. But no, I'm just kidding. It's perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. And so it's great. It's been great having you on. Thank you so much for coming on meaningforge with me and sharing your story and then how you make, embody, and share meaning in your life. And so thank you so much. On my show, you have the final words. I don't. And so please, if you're watching, like, comment, subscribe, share with family and friends. Find us on YouTube. Find us on Buzzsprout. By the time this interview airs, hopefully we'll be caught up on the audio versions. If not, well, hang on tight because they're all coming in anyway at some point. So.
Well, first off, I want to say thanks, Jim, for having me on here. And what I will say to, my final words are just one thing. Just take one thing from this. I always say it in my podcast, Fight the Burnout. Just take one thing from this whole thing and start running with it. Don't overcomplicate any of it. And yeah, just remember that you are where you are and that you are meant to be there. We try and put so much and complicate so many different things. And everything you heard today is from years and years of work and hard work and struggles and challenges and processing and seeking and financial spending and all that on things. But just take one thing from this and don't overcomplicate it and you'll get there. The other thing I'd say is invest in yourself. Make sure that you're investing in yourself regularly. Coaches have coaches. I have a couple coaches. Just signed up for another coach. And what it does is it helps you get out of your own head. We can get in our own heads pretty easily. So, just if that's the one thing that you take away, get a coach because they will look at that 30,000 foot view. But I want to say thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. Thanks for sticking all the way to the end. We appreciate, and like I said before, just the starfish. Want to help one person. If this helps one person. So if it did, please send me an email or contact me on LinkedIn. Again, it's Chris Chandler-Yates or it's team@createfromwhy.com. And we will, I'd love to hear your greatest takeaway, that one thing, or if there's two, then two. But yeah, thanks again for being here. If you want to learn more about me and my program, come over to my LinkedIn or to createfromwhy.com. Or you can come to my Instagram. It's currently Knocking Demon Coaching and see what we're all about. But anyways, love you. Thanks for listening. And I'll stop rambling now. So we'll talk to you guys soon. And make sure you like and subscribe. And again, thank you, Jim. Awesome. So like I said, find one thing. But if I had to, put that one thing out there for you to really know, it'd be secure in yourself. Know yourself. That why statement, that mission statement is going to help you do that process. But know yourself and be confident in what you know. Because at the end of the day, you're you know yourself better than anybody else, even though people might say differently. But know that, know yourself and be confident in yourself. If you're struggling with that, then obviously, find people to help you find who you are. And it's okay to get lost at times. We all do it. And we all need to be pulled back. That's why, again, the coaching. But just know yourself and be confident in you and confident in your decisions. So yeah, that's what I would have to say. My number one piece of advice for you would be.